Praise the Lord, my beautiful, blessed souls. We are back with Bruised and Not Broken. I am on here. This is about to be something serious now because I'm in Dueteronomy chapter 28, and I was just doing, looking up some stuff in regards, but this is going to get really serious, and we're going to look into it right now. I already read Dueteronomy 28. I have the outline for that. I will be posting this in a part 1 and part 2. This will be part 2 because this is the actual Willie Lynch letter itself, and we're going to get into it and we're going to discuss the infamous letter. Okay, so I had discussed it's called the Willie Lynch letter, the making of a slave, if you would like to see that, and we're going to get into the introduction. The infamous Willie Lynch letter gives both African and Caucasian students and teachers some insight concerning brutal and inhumane psychology behind the African slave trade, the materialistic viewpoint behind the African slave trade, the materialistic viewpoint of Southern plantation owners that slavery was a business, and the victims of chattel slavery were merely pawns in an economic gain of debauchery, crossbreeding, interracial rape, and mental conditioning of a Negroid race they considered subhuman. So now we were talking about the blessings and or the cursings of the Egyptians, or the Israelites, not the Egyptians. The Israelites, the chosen people, God's chosen people, what he told them to do and not to do, the blessings and or the curses, and what would happen to them. So we already know that we already know what happened because we see it throughout the world. We see what went on with the transatlantic slave trade. Now, introduction to this is equally important is the international nature of the European economic, political, and cultural climate that influenced the slave trade. Within the time scale of African history, it was a relatively short period. No, it was not. A mere 1.5 centuries from the most intensive phase of the Atlantic slave trade to the event of European administration and dominance, long before the slave trade coast had been charted by the Portuguese and the people off the area west of Benin between Volta River and Lagos. European traders traced a cultural history which linked them with the earliest Yoruba settlements to the northern and eastern borders of Africa. So now, remember, Ethiopian Bible is the first original Bible. But remember, they were scattered because they were scattered all over. So, not talking about Yoruba, I'm talking about the children of Israel. So there were considerable debates during the colonial periods in the United States in the late 1700s. The attention of the national government was mainly directed to slavery and rising numbers of slaves traded and imported into the South. The first debate was held in Congress 1789 on the question whether taxes should be paid on the imported slaves. During the debate on the slavery duty bill, which was introduced by Mr. Clymer's committee, Parker of Virginia moved that on May 3rd, 1789, a tax of $10 per capita be laid on slaves imported. So we're going to look at these. Remember, this is what it looks like. And I'm showing you, so this is what I've read already. You can go online and you can look it up. Oh, well, that's the introduction. So I'm just continuing on. He plainly stated that the tax was designed to check the trade and that he was sorry that Constitution prevented Congress from prohibiting the importation altogether. The proposal was evidently unwelcome and the cause extended debate. Smith of South Carolina wanted to postpone the matter, so big with the serious consequences to the state he represented. Roger Sherman of Connecticut could not reconcile himself to the insertion of human beings as an article of duty among goods, meaning wares and merchandise, so not considered at all to be human beings, mere cattle. This is why the laws and the Constitution, and we can talk about this all day, do not apply to black people. So we're looking at that. Okay. Introduction to Jackson of Georgia argued against any restriction and thought such states such as Virginia ought to let their neighbors get supply before they impose such burden upon the importation. Some congressmen argued during that Congress should wipe off the stigma under which America labored. This brought Jackson again to his feet. He believed, in spite of the fashion of the day, the Negroes were better off as slaves than as freemen, and that as the tax was partial, it would be the most indigenous tax Congress could impose. So that's that. Okay, we're going to get in. We're continuing on. Such sentiments were district advance in pro-slavery doctrine and call for protests from Congressman Madison of Virginia. They were both moral arguments and legal positions to the question of slavery in the South. On one side, it began with the rights of a man and descended to stickling for it to have a decent appearance on the statute book. On the other side, it began with the uplifting of the heathen and descended to a denial of the applicability of moral principles to the question. What question is that? Said Holland of North Carolina, it is admitted that the condition of slaves in the southern states is much superior to that of those in Africa. Holland's opinion, who then will say that the trade is immoral? But in fact, morality has nothing to do with this traffic, for Joseph Clay declared it must appear to every man of common sense that the question could be considered in a commercial point of view only, so as goods, not as human beings. The other side declared that by laws of God and man, these captured Negroes are entitled to their freedom as clearly and absolutely as we are. Nevertheless, some were willing to leave them to the tender mercies of the slave states, so as long as the statute book was not disgraced by no explicit recognition of slavery. What? Act like it never existed. This is what we continue to do. The moral question were argued back and forth, but there were no question of tremendous profitability using slavery in exchange for molasses, sugar, textile, spices, and massive free labor of the cotton production on numerous plantations in the South. The system began with conspiratorial battle of wits between European traders and African chiefs. So like I said, it is not just about black people, although we always say if you're black, you're right. That is not so. Slave traders were required to know not only the state of the trade if they were to see a profit, but also the likely supply of slaves available on hand and the likely supplies of ships on the other. Also, the varying values of many different standards of payment. Coins were seldom or never used on the coast. Mostly the chiefs and the slave traders dealt in rolls of tobacco, barrels of rum, firearms, and generally in length of iron or copper, or in pots and basins or brass. The slavers' books are full of all of this. So like I said, slavery is not just about black and white, because black people had just as much hand in their own demise as we do today. Regardless of the economic prosperity enjoyed during African slave trade and the tedious burden placed on the backs of African people, most will agree that the psychological damage and the atrocities inflicted on black people during that point of time and even today are the most outrageous examples of injustice, oppression ever experienced by humanity. February 1999. Why is that? Because Willie Lynch, The Untold Story. Now this is where it's going to get good. Okay, this speech was delivered by white slave owner Willie Lynch on the banks of the James River in 1712. Willie Lynch, The Untold Story. And the message is still true to today. Why? It's written by Willie Lynch. It's where we get lynching from, hangings of trees. So when we see KKK nothing's done to them and all these other atrocities, but everyone else out here who are regular people, especially when you're black, you're going through all of this extra when it comes to the justice system. This is why. These are spiritual things. These are principalities, powers, rulers, and high places. This is what we need to be fighting against. This is where the true spiritual war is, and this is where we need God to step in on behalf of his people. But obedience is going to be the thing. And this message is still true today by Willie Lynch. Gentlemen, I greet you here on the banks of the James River in the year of our Lord, 1100. I'm going to leave all of that because they pissed me off. I shall thank you first, gentlemen, a colony of Virginia, for bringing me here. I'm here to help you solve one of your problems with your slave. The invitation reached me on the modest plantation in the West Indies. So where was he living? In the West Indies. He already had them already under his control. I have experimented with this, some newest and still the oldest methods of control of slaves. Ancient Rome would envy us if my program is implemented. Like I said, these are still the Babylonian, the Roman, the Greek, all of those same statues, Egyptians, all of that, because this is what they practice. This is Satan worship. This is what they practice. And because of it, we see how these atrocities can be nothing to them. I remember the Caucasoid people were from the Edomites, and this is why God had such a problem with them too. They were always after Esau's kids, the Edomites, always after Jacob and his children. Why? Because that was his twin brother. And remember, they with the blessing was switched out. So he always hated Jacob. Remember, God said he loved Jacob and he hated Esau. And this is why. Because they went up into the mountains and this is what they were doing. This is the wickedness that they were doing. As our boat sailed south of the James River, named for our illustrious king, whose version of the Bible we cherish. Why? Because it's their version that they created out of the Ethiopian Bible. Please understand, they redid it. I saw enough to know your problems is not unique. While Rome used cords of wood as crosses for standing human bodies along its old highways in great numbers, you are here using the tree and the rope on occasion. So this is them talking about hanging of bodies. Christ was also crucified, right? On what? I caught the whiff of a dead slave hanging from a tree a couple of miles back. You are not only losing valuable stocks by hangings. Why? Because this is what we're considered livestock. This is how they built. Stocks and bonds was actually human beings. It's a human trafficking. This is the same thing they're doing right now. Slavery. You are having uprisings. Slaves are running away. Your crops are sometimes left in the fields too long for maximum profit, meaning they're not able to gather them and they go bad. Okay, you suffer occasional fires. Your animals are killed. Gentlemen, you know what the problems are. I do not need to elaborate. I am not here to enumerate your problems. However, I'm here to introduce you to a new method of solving them. The untold story. In my bag, I have a foolproof method for controlling your black slaves. I guarantee every one of you that if it's installed correctly, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. My method is simple. Any member of your family to oversee it can use it, meaning this is for all the white people, meaning them and their children, their wives. This is why they were raised to be this way, to be so hateful. Why? Because this is what their religion is. This is what they believe in. Now, they package it as Christianity, but like I said, this is really truthfully Satan worship. Why? Because God does not agree with any of this, and they use the Bible to do this. They took their version because, remember, King James Version is after the Ethiopian, but it's his version that they're using. I have outlined a number of differences among the slaves, and I take these differences and make them bigger, meaning he magnifies them. I use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes, meaning jealousy, all of these things. These methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies, and it will work throughout the South. Take this simple little list of differences and think about them. Willie Lynch, The Untold Story. On top of my list is age, but is there only because it starts with the letter A. The second is color or shade. There is intelligence, size, sex, size of plantation, status on plantation, attitude of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley or on the hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short, meaning the differences. If they're fat, use it against each other. What are we using against each other? Now that you have a list of the differences of who we are as people, I shall give you an outline of action. But before that, I shall assure you that distrust is stronger than trust, and envy is stronger than adulation, respect, or admiration. The black slave, after receiving this indoctrination, shall carry it on and will become self-refueling and self-generation for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands. So that once they implement it and it's in their minds, this is the reprogram of them, they will continue this themselves. They can step away and let it continue on. They plant the seed and let it germinate. What are we doing here? Willie Lynch, The Untold Story. Don't forget, you must pitch the old black male versus the young black male, and the young black male against the old black male. You must use the dark-skinned slave versus the light-skinned slaves, and the light-skinned slaves versus the dark-skinned slaves. This is what he's telling them to implement. This is what he's using. You must use the female versus the male and the male versus the female. You must also have your white servants and overseers distrust all blacks, but it is necessary that your slaves trust and depend on us. They must love, respect, and trust only us. Gentlemen, these kits are the keys to control. Use them Have your wives and your children use them. Never miss an opportunity. If used intensely for 1 year, the slaves themselves will remain perpetually distrustful. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we're going to continue on. Let's make a slave. This is what it's called. Hold on. Let's make a slave. This is the building and construction of a slave. And this is how you get people to do exactly what we're doing to each other right now. By the Black Arcade Library, it was in the interest and business of slaveholders to study human nature. This is what they do. They're still doing this to this day. And the slave nature in particular, with a view to practical results, and many of them attained astonishing proficiency in this direction. They had to deal not with earth, wood, and stone, but with men, and they, by every regard, they had known for their safety and prosperity. They had need to know the material on which they were to work. So if they want to monitor you, this is where they get other blacks to monitor us and use them, the ones that they allow to have the extra freedoms. This is the house nigga versus the field nigga, so that they can turn around and do what? Always have control. These are them spirits, monitoring, familiar, all of those. Conscious of the injustice and wrong they were every hour perpetuating, and knowing what they themselves would do were they victims of such wrongs. This is why they never want to talk about it, because they never want them tables to turn. Why? It has a lot of spiritual sorcery too. This is why all of their government contracts, all their government stuff is built on stuff like this, because it is satanic worship. When you see Freemasonry and all this getting into government, the laws that they're making, this is what this is about. Victims of such wrongs, they were constantly looking for the first signs of dread retribution. They watched, therefore, with skilled and practiced eyes, and learned to read with great accuracy the state and mind and heart of the slave. Through his sable face, usual sobriety, apparent abstraction, sullenness, and indifference, indeed, any mood out of the common way afforded ground for suspicion and inquiry. Frederick Douglass. Why they had to monitor us. Let's make a slave. Let's make a slave. Let's make a slave. A study of the scientific process of man breaking and slave making. It describes the rationale and the results of Anglo-Saxon's idea and methods of ensuring the master-slave relationship. Let's make a slave. The origin and development of social being called the Negro. Let's make a slave. A slave, what do I need? First of all, we need a black nigga, a man, a pregnant nigga woman, and her baby nigga boy. Second, I will use the same basic principle that we use in the breaking of a horse. So this is what they use, combined with some more sustaining factors. And this is why to them we are cattle. Let's make a slave. When we do it with the horse, we break them from one form of life to another. That is, we reduce them from their natural state. This is what they do in nature. Take away everything. Whereas nature provides them with the natural capacity to take care of their basic needs, right? The needs and necessities of their offspring. We break that natural string of independence from them and thereby create dependency states so that we may be able to get from them useful production for our business and pleasure. Let's make a slave. They continue. Cardinal principles for making a Negro. Remember, the Negro land was the land where they were free. For fear that our future generations may not understand the principles of breaking both horse and man, we lay down the art. For if we are to sustain our basic economy, we must break and tie both the beast together, the nigger and the horse, and we understand that short-range planning in economics results in periodic chaos. So that to avoid turmoil in the economy, it requires us to have breadth and depth in long-range comprehensive planning, articulation, both skills, and sharp perception. We lay down the following principles for long-range comprehensive economic planning. Remember, we were treated as cattle. We're treated as cattle, livestock. We were traded just like the stock market, and we built up the countries. We built up the nations. But remember, this is what it said in Dueteronomy 28. Pay attention to Dueteronomy 28. Let's make a slave. Both horse and nigger are no good to the economy in the wild or natural state. Both must be broken and tied together for orderly production. For the orderly futures, special and particular attention must be paid to the female and the young offspring. Both must be crossbred to produce a variety and division of labor. Both must be taught to respond to a particular new language. Psychological and physical instruction of containment must be created for both. Let's make a slave. We hold the above 6 cardinal principles as truths to be self-evident based on the following discourse concerning the economics of breaking and tying the horse and the nigger together, all inclusive of the 6 principles laid down above. Note, neither principle alone will suffice for good economics, so they have to practice all principles must be employed for the orderly good of the nation. According to both, a wild horse and a wild natural nigger is dangerous, even if captured, for they will have a tendency to seek their customary freedom, and in doing so might kill you in your sleep. You cannot rest. This is why? Because they would never want the atrocities that they have done to us to be done to them. This is why they act like they don't know. They know. They know. They know exactly what they did. And although we're supposed to forgive and forget and move forward, we have to first, there's supposed to first be what? Repentance. Let's make a slave. They sleep while you are awake and are awake while you are asleep. They are dangerous near the family house, and it requires too much labor to watch them away from the house. Above all, you cannot get them to work in the natural state. Hence, both the horse and the nigger must be broken. That is, break them from one form of mental life to another. Keep the body and take the mind. In other words, break the will to resist. Now, the breaking process is the same for both the horse and the nigger, only slightly varying in degrees, meaning comparing us to cattle. But as we said before, there is an art in long-range economic planning. You must keep your eye and thoughts on the female and the offspring of the horse and the nigger. Why? That's the future generations. The mother is the one who's going to bear. And bearing children when you're in fear, it puts fear in the children. Let's make a slave. A brief discourse in offspring development would shed light on the key to sound economic principles. Pay little attention to the generation of original breaking, but concentrate on future generations, the younger. That's why we see the younger generations is always the target. Therefore, if you break the female mother, she will break the offspring. Why? Because it's in her to do so, to keep them safe. In its early years of development, and when the offspring is old enough to work, she will deliver it up to you. For her normal female protective tendencies will have been lost in the original breaking process to keep what? We always say, we make sure when it comes to our boys that we coddle them. Why? Because guess what? If they go out being rough and tough and then they get lynched, then what? What you gonna tell the mother? Oh, well, it's too bad, so sad that her son was out. Right. It's not that we want it. This is the process. This is the actual mindset, the psychological thing that they did to us. A brief discourse of offspring. Wait. Okay. The protective tendency will be lost in the original breaking process. For example, take the case of the wild stud horse, a female horse and an already infant horse, and compare the breaking process with 2 nigger males in their natural state and a pregnant nigger woman with her infant offspring. Take the stud horse, break him for the limited containment. What did they do? Have sex with them. This was one of the practices. As you can see, even with the industry, the buck breaking process to humiliate them, to traumatize them. Let's make a slave. Completely break the female horse until she becomes very gentle, whereas you or anybody can ride her in comfort. Breed the male and the stud until you have the desired offspring. Then you can turn the stud to freedom until you need him again. Train the female horse whereby she will eat out of your hand, and she will in turn train the infant horse to eat out of your hand also. When it comes to break the uncivilized nigger, use the same process but vary in degree and step up the pressure so as to do a complete reversal of the mind. Let's make a slave. Take the meanest and most relentless nigger, strip him of his clothes in front of the remaining male niggers, the female nigger, the nigger infant, tar and feather him, tie each leg to a different horse in opposite directions, set him fire, and beat both horses to pull him apart in front of the remaining niggers. The next step is to take the bullwhip and beat the remaining nigger male to the point of death in front of the female and the infant. Don't kill him. Put the fear of God in him, for he can be useful for future breeding. Want to know where the fear comes? That's where it comes. Let's make a slave. The breaking process of African women. Then take the female and run a series of tests on her to see if she will submit to your desire willingly. Remember, a lot of them were having sex with them. Test her in every way because she is the most important factor for good economics. Why? She's the breeder. She's going to breed. If she shows any sign of resistance in submitting completely to your will, do not hesitate to use the bullwhip on her to extract the last bit of be out of her. Take care not to kill her, for in doing so, you spoil good economics, meaning to be able to breed her again. When in complete submission, she will train her offspring in early years to submit to labor when they become of age. And that's her way of caring and taking care of her children. Why? Because who wants their child or anyone to be killed right in front of them? Who wants that? Who wants that? Hold on. Yes, hello? Can I help you? Front desk? No, she's gone. Hold on. Give me 1 second. I have to pause this.